This text is being fulfilled today even as you listen. Jesus picks up the scriptures, the Old Testament, he reads it, he sits down, and then he starts to teach based upon the scriptures. When people read the scriptures, sometimes we come with different experiences of reading, of different genres of reading. Sometimes people read the scriptures and they think it's a little bit like perhaps a fiction story. Or others think it's perhaps fantasy. Others think at times, depending on which passage you take, you get a bit of romantic poetry thrown in there occasionally. There's a bit of tragedy. Sometimes it's a bit like journalism, accounting the stories of a particular event, a bit like reading the newspaper or a magazine. Sometimes it's a bit like reading history or studying different things. There are lots of ways to read the scriptures, and we shouldn't dismiss any particular method of reading the scriptures. Sometimes people look at the scriptures and they say, "Oh, I can't work it out scientifically, so I can't read the scriptures." But the scriptures are more than just a science book. They're more than just a particular genre. And Jesus is giving us an indication of how we're meant to read the scriptures. The scriptures are not just something about things that happened in the past. When Jesus sits down and starts to read, he brings the scriptures and makes it present to the particular time of the people. And when we read the scriptures, yes, we're reading something that was recorded sometimes 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 years ago. But these words are speaking to us today as well. Today, the church dedicates this Sunday to recognising the importance of the Word of God. And I think it actually works very well for the church in Australia, because next week, teachers will start to get ready to go back to school, and then the beginning of the week after, we'll get back to some normality. In other parts of the world, they've already come back from Christmas holidays and they're in the middle of their academic year. Whereas we have this Sunday, the third Sunday in Ordinary Time, dedicated to thinking about what the Word of God is. And there are different ways that we can read and understand the Word of God. We should look into the fact that each of the books of the Bible were written by a human person. But they were also written by a human person under the inspiration of God. And so we can learn things about people from particular periods of time, where we learn about the writer, that human author, who brings in elements of the history and their understanding of life and existence. And those things are interesting. But the scriptures are more than just a snapshot of a historical moment that happened 2,000 or 4,000 years ago. Because these people are writing about things of God, and they're writing with the inspiration of God. And so we look into it from a spiritual perspective. What was God saying to each of the writers who wrote down these words? But then it comes to us as well, because Jesus says the text is being fulfilled today even as you listen. And so when we listen, the text is being fulfilled as well. It's being made present to us. And God is present here with us when we read the scriptures. And we're given an indication when Jesus picks up the scriptures what actually happens. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor. And that's part of what we're called to do as well. To proclaim liberty to captives, to the blind new sight, to set the downtrodden free, and to proclaim the Lord's year of favour. This is what we're called to do. It's good news. We are meant to come to listen, reflect on the scriptures, to treasure the word of God. From the first reading, the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament, we have this great respect, a liturgical reverence for the scriptures. The people come, they bow before the word of God, they listen, they experience God by hearing the word of God, and then they go and live it out. And Jesus has the same experience for the people of his time. They hear, Jesus explains it, and then they go and live it. And that's what we do every time we come together. We're not just hearing about stories of the past. We're called right now to bring good news into our world. In the midst of fear, we're called to be positive, to bring good news to those who are in poverty. And poverty takes all sorts of faces. People might be in material poverty, but there might also be people in psychological or spiritual poverty, or poverty because of a fear of what's happening around us. And we're called to be the ones to bring light and joy and peace, tranquility into this context. This is part of how the scriptures speak to us. They aren't just texts that are from the past. They're living now. They speak to us now. And it's a good thing to think about the way people have read the scriptures in the past, the way they understood it at the time of Jesus, the way they've understood it right throughout history. But then we can understand, what does this mean for us right at this moment? Who are the poor that we're called to bring good news to this week? Who are we meant to bring liberty and freedom to? Who are those who are in captivity? There's all sorts of different captivity and versions of captivity today. How can we bring good news? Today we have a baptism of a little child who's down the back now. Has gone wandering, I think. And the parents and those who are here today to support Hazel in baptism, part of the job of being a Christian is to listen. We listen to the word of God, we read the scriptures and then listen more. But then we're called to put it into practice. We're called to go and into the world and bring the good news, to live that out through lives of holiness. And that's what Hazel's committing to today. She's a little bit young to be committing to it herself. And so the parents and the godparents are saying, we're going to commit to the way of holiness, the way of God's love for Hazel. And that's what we all accept and embrace as being Christians. So thank you to the parents today. It's a great joy to have a baptism and to have a baptism as part of our community at this time. And it's great that we've been able to gather together. He has sent me to bring the good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives and to the blind new sight, to set the downtrodden free and to proclaim the Lord's year of favour. Let's go this year and proclaim good news. Good news to Hazel, good news to our community. The good news of Jesus Christ needs to be spread, and we're called as followers of Christ to hear, to listen, and to then go and proclaim peace and goodness to our world.